Peppa Pig and the Little Fan. One day, Peppa finds a small fan on the floor near the stairs.
Whoa!
She picks it up and turns it on. A gentle breeze blows, making Peppa feel amused. George puts his hand near the fan to feel the cool air. Peppa places a small piece of paper in front of the fan, and it lifts into the air. The little fan turns the moment into a fun and playful experience for Peppa and George. Peppa Pig and the Shooting Star Train. A shooting star streaks across the night sky, surprising Peppa and George. It lands and turns into a glowing train in their yard. The train doors open, inviting them aboard. They travel through starry skies past constellations and planets. The train returns them home, leaving a shining star ticket behind. Peppa Pig and the Little Drum. One day, Peppa notices a small drum on the floor. She gently taps the drum to hear its sound. George listens carefully and finds the sound very fun. Soon, George tries playing the drum too. Peppa and George take turns making a cheerful rhythm. The little drum turns the room into a tiny concert for Peppa and George.
Peppa's Forest Picnic. Today, Peppa's family goes on a picnic in the forest. George chases a butterfly, making Peppa giggle. Mummy Pig sets up lunch while Daddy Pig finds a shady spot. Peppa shares apples with everyone, and George hugs her happily. The family relaxes together, smiling under the peaceful sky.
Peppa Pig and the Lost Balloon. Today, Peppa and George are playing with a very special balloon. A playful breeze lifts the balloon out of Peppa's hand. The balloon slowly floats over familiar places in the garden. It seems to explore the world all by itself. Peppa and George learn that letting things go can be fun too. Even though the balloon is gone, the happiness stays. Having fun.
Peppa and the shared raincoat. It's a rainy day. Peppa wears her raincoat, but George forgot his. George looks cold and sad. Peppa worries for her little brother. Peppa smiles and pulls George under her coat. They giggle together.
Ha!
Mummy Pig brings another coat. You're so sweet when you share. After the rain, the family watches a rainbow. Peppa says, sharing makes everything warmer, even rainy days.
Peppa Pig and the colorful umbrella. One day, Peppa notices a colorful umbrella in the corner of the room.
Huh?
Oh! She picks it up and opens it wide. George stands under the umbrella and looks up at the bright colors. Peppa gently spins the umbrella. George tries spinning the umbrella too and giggles with joy. The colorful umbrella turns into a fun little game for Peppa and George.
Library. Today, Peppa and George are going to the bookstore. Come on, family, let's get in the car. Peppa and George really love going to the bookstore. There are so many books to choose from. Peppa picks a princess book. And George chooses a dinosaur book.
Peppa Pig and the Very Low Cloud. One morning, Peppa and George notice a cloud floating lower than usual. The cloud drifts across the yard as if taking a walk. Peppa wonders if she can touch the cloud. The cloud keeps changing shape with the gentle wind. A small cloud is enough to cool the whole garden. Soon, the cloud floats back up, leaving a peaceful morning behind.
Peppa Pig and the Talking Rainbow. After the rain, a rainbow appeared, smiling at Peppa. The rainbow greeted Peppa warmly. Peppa jumped in surprise, while George laughed joyfully. Each color has a feeling. Red for joy, blue for calm. Peppa and George danced beneath it, surrounded by sparkles. As the rainbow faded, Peppa still heard laughter in the wind. Maybe the rainbow was still watching.
Peppa Pig and the Toy Trumpet. One day, Peppa finds a small toy trumpet on the floor. She picks it up and wonders how it works. Peppa gently blows into the trumpet, making a funny sound. George laughs happily when he hears the sound. Soon, George tries blowing the trumpet too. The little trumpet turns the room into a cheerful musical game for Peppa and George. Peppa Pig and the Rocking Chair. On a sunny morning, Peppa sits on a chair in front of the house. Today, the chair doesn't seem to want to stay still. Yippee! When George joins in, the chair rocks even more. The rocking turns into a fun balancing game. After a while, the chair slowly comes to rest. Sometimes, even a gently rocking chair can make the morning special.
Peppa and George were walking when they discovered a mysterious vegetable garden with tall, colorful plants. George curiously touched a giant carrot, while Peppa picked up a pumpkin almost as big as her head.
Wow!
Mummy Pig entered the garden, smiling and said, "Look, kids, these vegetables are really special." Peppa and George played hopping through the tall plants, laughing joyfully across the garden. Daddy Pig appeared with a small cart so the whole family could harvest the vegetables together. Finally, the whole family stood in the garden, admiring the colorful pumpkins, carrots, and greens, happily taking a family photo.
Peppa Pig and the Alarm Clock. One morning, Peppa and George notice an alarm clock on the table. Suddenly, the clock starts ringing loudly. Peppa gently touches the clock, and the ringing stops. But when George presses a button, the alarm rings again. In the end, the clock becomes a funny part of their morning. Peppa Pig and the Reflecting Puddle. After a light rain, a small puddle shines in the sun. Peppa sees the blue sky reflected inside it. George touches the water and the sky begins to ripple. Peppa steps in gently, making tiny splashes. Soon the puddle turns into a fun little game. When the water becomes calm again, they see their smiling reflections in it. Peppa Pig and the noisy vacuum cleaner. Everything is quiet until the vacuum cleaner wakes up. The machine starts making loud noises, showing its power.
Whoa!
Everything nearby gets pulled toward the vacuum. Whoa! The vacuum moves around the room as if taking a walk.
Whoa!
After all the noise, the room becomes perfectly clean.
Wow!
Sometimes a little noise can be useful. Peppa Pig and the playful wind. It looks like a perfectly normal afternoon until the wind arrives. The wind blows through the garden as if it wants to join the fun. Leaves begin to swirl around, flying everywhere. Peppa tries to catch a leaf, but the wind is always one step ahead. After a while, the wind seems to get tired and calms down. Peppa and George learn that sometimes invisible things can bring the biggest fun.
Peppa and George brought the big building blocks set from the house to the yard, excited to start the game. Mommy Pig spread a large blanket on the grass, making it comfortable for Peppa and George to play with their Lego. Peppa started building a beautiful castle with the large blocks, while George carefully placed the smaller pieces around it. Daddy Pig joined in, trying to build a tall tower with the blocks, making the whole family laugh. Mummy Pig added special blocks to the castle, creating flags and flowers, and the whole family clapped and cheered. The family sat around the Lego castle, laughing happily and taking photos of their wonderful creation. Peppa and the shared umbrella. It's a rainy morning, and Peppa brings her favorite pink umbrella. She sees Wendy Wolf getting wet under a tree. Peppa smiles and shares her umbrella with Wendy. They walk together, splashing puddles and singing happily. Madame Gazelle says, "Sharing is wonderful." Peppa and Wendy smile under the pink umbrella.
Peppa Pig and the backward clock. One quiet afternoon, Peppa and George noticed something strange about the clock in their living room. Instead of moving forward, the clock hands begin to turn backward. As the clock runs backward, everything seems to slow down. Even the smallest movements become gentle and slow.
With a light touch, time pauses for a moment. When everything returns to normal, Peppa realizes that sometimes slowing down can be fun too. Peppa Pig and the Giant Car. Peppa and George are surprised to see a giant car blocking their gate. The wheels of the car are even taller than Peppa. The huge car casts a long shadow over the garden. Inside, the car looks like a moving room. As the car slowly moves, the whole garden seems to shake. Peppa and George realize that sometimes the bigger something is, the more curious it becomes.
Peppa Pig and the Magic Toy Car. One day, Peppa and George discover a small toy car on the floor.
Huh?
Peppa gently pushes the car and it rolls forward quickly. George happily drives the car around the room. In their imagination, the little car becomes a real car on a long road. The toy car climbs over hills and passes through fluffy clouds. Soon the car stops, but the fun adventure in their imagination continues.
Go to a restaurant.
Yahoo!
Today is a very fun day. Peppa, George, and Daddy Pig are going out. At the cinema, Gerald Giraffe has just finished watching a film and meets Peppa's family.
Hi!
George is starting to feel hungry. Gerald Giraffe has an idea. They will all go to the restaurant.
Peppa Pig and the hat that wouldn't stay still. Peppa loves her new hat. It looks perfect and fits just right. But the hat doesn't seem to agree with its position. Peppa carefully fixes the hat, and it immediately chooses a new spot. George finds this very funny. The hat looks like it's playing a game. Finally, the hat decides to rest for a while on the grass. Peppa learns that sometimes being comfortable is better than wearing a perfect hat. Peppa Pig and the balloon. One day, Peppa notices a red balloon floating in the room. She gently taps the balloon, and it slowly drifts upward. Peppa and George jump up together, trying to touch the balloon. Suddenly, the balloon drifts to another corner of the room. Peppa and George quickly think of a new game. The balloon floats back and forth, turning the whole room into a fun little playground.
Peppa and George couldn't believe their eyes. A giant truck was parked right in their yard. This truck is not only big but full of strange things inside. Peppa is curious and wants to try them all. George tried to push the giant wheel, but he might need a bit more strength to move it. No worries. Peppa decides to drive the giant truck, but it seems it's not as easy as she thought. Sometimes all it takes is a little push on the gas pedal to start an adventure, even if it's a bit out of control. Finally, the truck stops, and Peppa and George realize one thing. Sometimes the fun starts with the most random things.
Peppa Pig and the Wandering Shadow. On a sunny afternoon, Peppa's shadow looks longer than usual. Today, the shadow doesn't want to move the same way. George tries to chase his shadow, but it's faster than expected. The shadows turn into a strange and funny game. As the sun sets, the shadows slowly fade. In the end, the shadow returns to where it belongs.
Peppa and the shared lunch. Today, there's a new friend, Wendy Wolf, who forgot her lunch.
Hey!
Peppa looks at her 2 sandwiches and thinks of Wendy sitting quietly. Let's share, says Peppa. Wendy smiles happily. Everyone shares their food. The playground fills with laughter. Madame Gazelle smiles. Sharing warms both the heart and the tummy.
Peppa Pig and the shape-shifting box. Peppa notices a very big cardboard box. It looks like just a box. But to Peppa, the box feels like a secret place. George gives the box a little push and the adventure begins. The box suddenly turns into a very special vehicle. In their imagination, the box can travel anywhere. Peppa and George learn that sometimes a simple box can hold a whole world of fun.
Peppa Pig and the Fishing Day Adventure. Peppa and George brought fishing rods to the lake. Daddy and Mummy Pig following, the lake sparkling in the sun. Peppa cast her line into the water. George watched the surface, eagerly waiting. Daddy Pig accidentally dropped his fishing rod into the lake. Peppa and George giggled. Peppa caught a flower floating on the water. George cheered, and the whole family laughed with delight. family packed up, Peppa and George waved goodbye to the lake, promising to come back next time.
Mummy Pig teaches Peppa Pig to share food. Today, Peppa had a very delicious cake. George looked at the cake and wanted to eat it too. Peppa liked the cake so much that she didn't want to share. George looked at it sadly. Mummy Pig gently explained that sharing food with family makes meals more joyful. Peppa thought for a moment, then cut the cake and gave a piece to George. George happily ate his cake. Peppa also smiled and enjoyed her piece. Sitting together on the porch, the whole family shared the cake. Peppa realized that sharing food makes everyone happier.
Peppa Pig and the Noisy Bucket. Peppa notices an ordinary bucket that doesn't seem ordinary today. One gentle tap, and the bucket replies with a fun sound. George taps harder, and the bucket sounds even more excited. Soon the bucket turns into an unexpected musical instrument. After the performance, the bucket needs a little rest. Peppa and George learn that sometimes fun comes from the simplest things.
Today, the pig family is going to the beach. Peppa and George laugh with joy. First, the family stops to admire the bright sun over the sea.
Peppa Pig and the strange noise in the garden. The garden is calm and quiet until a strange rustling sound comes from the bushes.
Hey! Hey!
The noise isn't loud, but it's curious enough that Peppa and George can't ignore it. Peppa bravely moves closer, while George chooses a safer spot behind her. It turns out the sound was just the wind, but Peppa and George aren't fully convinced yet. And then, the loudest noise in the garden comes from George stepping on a dry leaf. Peppa and George learn that sometimes the scariest things are just in our imagination.
Peppa and George ran outside to play as the rain started. They jumped into puddles, splashing water everywhere. Mummy Pig brought raincoats and reminded them, "Be careful, don't slip." Daddy Pig appeared with a big umbrella, sheltering Peppa and George from the rain. Peppa found a giant puddle, carefully jumped in, and laughed with joy. Finally, the whole family stood under the umbrella, watching Peppa and George dance in the rain, laughing together. Peppa and George were amazed when a giant ball rolled toward them. The ball was too big, but Peppa didn't give up and decided to push it. The rolling ball created funny circles, making Peppa laugh nonstop. George joined in, helping Peppa to control the giant ball together. When the ball hit a puddle, huge splashes sprayed everywhere, making them laugh even more. Finally, they realized that sometimes the greatest fun is just a giant ball and your own laughter. It's a beautiful morning at Peppa's house. George Pig really loves to play outside. Mommy, Daddy, and Peppa have already gone out too. Hop in the car. Time to hit the road. George Pig loves going shopping with his family. Peppa and George love going shopping.
Hey!
First, we need to find the bananas.
Peppa Pig and the Flying Umbrella. A sudden rain makes Peppa grab her colorful umbrella. Today, the umbrella seems excited by the wind. A strong gust lifts the umbrella higher than expected. It spins in the air like it's performing. As the wind slows down, the umbrella gently returns. Sometimes, even the rain brings a little adventure.
Peppa Pig and the Forest Walking Adventure. Peppa and George walked along the forest trail, Daddy and Mummy Pig following, with trees green on both sides. Peppa spotted a yellow butterfly flying. George pointed excitedly. Daddy Pig slid lightly on a wet branch. Peppa and George giggled. Mummy Pig picked some wild strawberries and gave them to Peppa and George, both laughing happily. The family stood on a hilltop, looking at the green forest, holding hands and laughing happily.
Peppa Pig and the Mysterious Hole in the Garden. One morning, Peppa and George discover a small hole in the garden. The hole doesn't look deep, but it feels full of secrets. A small leaf is dropped inside and disappears. Peppa wonders if there is another world beneath. Huh? Wow! Suddenly, a tiny visitor crawls out. Sometimes, the biggest mysteries are actually very small.
Peppa Pig and the magnifying glass. One day, Peppa finds a small magnifying glass on the table. She looks through it and notices everything appears bigger. Through the magnifying glass, a tiny leaf suddenly looks very large. George becomes curious and wants to try it too. George looks at his toy through the magnifying glass, and it seems much bigger. With just a magnifying glass, Peppa and George enjoy a fun little discovery adventure.
A colorful rainy day. It is raining outside. Peppa and George cannot play in the garden. Peppa goes into the house. Daddy Pig is watching TV. Oh, Daddy Pig has an idea. He brings out a box of crayons. Peppa wants to draw, and George chooses yellow for Peppa. And Peppa draws her favorite yellow dinosaur.
Peppa Pig and the ice cream that wouldn't melt. On a warm, sunny day, Peppa holds a big ice cream.
Oh!
Strangely, the ice cream doesn't melt. Even under the bright sun, it stays the same. George touches it and finds it still cold. Finally, a small drop begins to melt. Even the strangest things only last for a little while.
Picnic day. Today, Peppa and George are very excited because the family is going on a picnic. Mommy Pig and Daddy Pig are ready too. The whole family gets in the car. Peppa loves going out, and so does George. Daddy Pig spreads the blanket, and Mommy Pig puts down the picnic basket. Peppa chases a pretty butterfly, and George runs after his sister. Peppa tries to catch the butterfly.
Peppa Pig and the Endless Ladder. Peppa and George discover a ladder that seems to have no end. With each step, the ladder looks a little taller. It feels like the ladder is reaching for the sky. Even the ladder seems excited. Suddenly, it shrinks back to normal. Sometimes, imagination is the tallest thing of all.
The magical ladder. But this was no ordinary ladder. It began to shake and slowly lift off the ground. Peppa climbed up quickly while George held on tight. Together, they rose higher and higher. The ladder floated past the apple tree, gently knocking apples down into the grass. Finally, the ladder landed back on the ground. Peppa and George tumbled off, laughing all the way. The giant shoe. Peppa and George were stunned when they saw a giant shoe appear in the garden. Peppa immediately turned it into a playground, while George was still wondering, whose shoe could this be? For Peppa, the shoe became the perfect slide. For George, it was more like a treasure chest. Soon, the giant shoe rolled around like a ride, filling the garden with laughter. Peppa and George dashed across the garden, giggling and chasing after the giant shoe as if it were the most magical toy in the world. But the biggest surprise came when Daddy Pig showed up, holding another giant shoe. In the end, the family realized that joy needs no reason, just a pair of oversized shoes and endless imagination.
Peppa Pig and the rolling chair. A normal chair stands quietly in front of the house, or so it seems. As soon as Peppa sits down, the chair begins to move. A small push sends it rolling across the yard. The chair turns into a short and surprising ride. Yahoo! After a little journey, it finds the perfect place to stop. Sometimes, even a chair can bring a tiny adventure. Peppa Pig and the Curious Mirror. One morning inside the house, Peppa and George find a shiny mirror in the corner of the room. Peppa tilts her head, and the reflection copies her.
Whoa!
George jumps on the carpet, and the mirror jumps too. They make funny faces together. Peppa wonders if there is another room inside the mirror. In the end, they laugh and enjoy their simple but fun discovery indoors. Peppa Pig and the door that wouldn't open. It's a perfect day, but the door to the garden refuses to cooperate. Peppa pulls, George pushes, the door chooses to stay completely still. Maybe they're standing in the wrong place. They try again, but the door doesn't change its mind. When nothing works, Peppa does the most important thing. Takes a short break. And then, when no one touches it, the door slowly opens on its own. Peppa and George learn that sometimes the hardest things become easy when you stop trying too hard.
Peppa Pig and the Rainbow Door. A beam of sunlight forms a bright rainbow on the wall, catching Peppa and George's attention. The rainbow turns into a glowing door, gently inviting them inside. They step through and discover a colorful valley with low-flowing clouds. They slide down Rainbow Hills surrounded by sparkling light. The door brings them home, leaving a tiny glowing spark as a memory.
Peppa Pig and the dancing light bulb. As evening comes, Peppa and George turn on the light to keep playing. But today, the light bulb seems very lively. The light flickers in a steady rhythm. Their shadows on the wall begin to dance along. After a short performance, the light becomes normal again. Sometimes, even a simple light can bring an unexpected joy. Peppa Pig and the flying umbrella. It looks like it's going to rain today, and Peppa has her umbrella ready. But Peppa soon discovers the wind has other plans. In a flash, the umbrella flies into the air without asking anyone. The umbrella looks very happy, as if it has always dreamed of flying. Finally, it lands gently on the grass, satisfied after its short adventure. Peppa learns that sometimes even familiar things want to explore the world.
Peppa and George lay on the grass, watching fluffy white clouds drift across the sky.
Peppa Pig and the melting cake. Peppa is very excited about the cake, especially on a sunny day like this. But the sun has its own plans for the cake. The cake seems to be changing shape right before their eyes. Peppa tries to save the cake, but the sunshine doesn't cooperate. Even though it's no longer perfect, the cake still looks delicious. Peppa and George learn that sometimes fun doesn't need to be perfect to be sweet.
Peppa Pig and the Mushroom Picking Adventure. Peppa and George took baskets into the forest. Daddy and Mummy Pig followed, everyone excited to explore. Peppa saw brown mushrooms growing on the grass, pointed and cheered. George jumped with joy. Daddy Pig showed Peppa how to pick mushrooms gently. Mummy Pig took photos. George picked a big mushroom, dropping smaller ones. Peppa laughed and helped him pick them up. The family placed mushrooms into their baskets, laughing, the forest fresh and green. The family left the forest with full baskets. Mummy Pig promised to make a delicious mushroom soup.
Peppa Pig and the Strange Mirror. One quiet afternoon, Peppa and George discover a strange mirror in the garden. The mirror reflects all of Peppa's movements. But for George, the reflection moves a little slower. Something is definitely not normal. The mirror turns every movement into a funny game. Sometimes seeing things differently can be a lot more fun. Peppa Pig and the Shape-Shifting Box. A large cardboard box appears in the middle of the living room. For Peppa, even an ordinary box can be exciting. The box starts to move as if it's going for a walk. In Peppa's imagination, the box turns into a train. Moments later, it becomes a spaceship flying into space. Sometimes the simplest things can bring the biggest joy. Peppa Pig and the strange-sounding trumpet. Peppa finds a toy trumpet that looks very ordinary. But when she tries to blow it, the sound is very different. George is startled at first, then becomes curious. Peppa blows more gently, and the trumpet immediately changes its mood. It turns out the trumpet likes to be played in its own way. Peppa and George learn that sometimes listening is just as important as making noise.